that Ryan's quit, that leaves only one factor for the reason everyone's leaving.
Is it me? Am I the problem? I guess that's as good of an intro as any. Welcome to Pop Culture Unboxing. I'm Matt. This isn't a video format on this one. So our confused stares at the empty chair there aren't going to work, Zach.
And I'm Zach.
Yeah.
I was like, oh dear. Yeah.
And if you're a longtime listener of the show, you might notice that something is missing here.
Yeah, it's a pretty big part.
You know, we don't have beers. That's what's missing.
That's the problem.
Yep.
We don't have our special words, the ones that make us drink.
We don't. We haven't had those for a while. We need to get those back into the rotation. Yeah, Zach is here. Ryan is the one who's not here. He had a family emergency, so he'll talk. If he wants to tell you more, he can in another episode. But he won't be joining us this week, and he said he might not join us next week. So we'll be the baby birds have left the nest, and now, when mom and dad aren't home, so now we can talk about whatever we want.
Debauchery.
So as a point of that, Ryan did send us a list because he did take the time to give us some things to talk about. Mm-hmm. The problem is, the very first thing he sent us was about the Black Adam movie with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Oh yeah.
Do you know anything about it?
So, I know nothing.
Same. Which means the value of us talking about this is almost zero. But
I know Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
I've heard of him too. I've seen him in a film or two.
He may have been in a couple good ones.
One or two. Yeah, Tooth Fairy.
Yeah, Tooth Fairy was good.
Yeah.
Tooth Fairy was good.
The football one.
The Pacifier. Oh wait, no, that was Vin Diesel.
They all do that. What? Because Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I always have to say his full name. I don't know why. He did Tooth Fairy. Before him, Vin Diesel did The Pacifier. Before him, Arnold Schwarzenegger did Kindergarten Cop.
Yep.
And also Jingle All the Way with a even younger Jake Lloyd.
Oh yeah.
Who was, if anyone doesn't know, was Anakin. Yeah,
that was If I'm right, I think Jingle All the Way is my brother's favorite Christmas movie.
It is a hoot.
He
it's
loves
so
it.
Absurd.
Well, it may have to do with Arnold Schwarzenegger because his next favorite movie is Twins with Danny DeVito.
Yeah,
which is, by the way, an absolutely hilarious movie. Like if the two of them together just fit. Like just the style of comedy that they bring together.
Yeah, I don't know if I've seen that one all the way through. I don't know why, but there's something about the picture of Arnold Schwarzenegger standing next to Danny DeVito. For some reason, makes me think of the movie Big with Tom Hanks.
Oh yeah, where he turns into an adult.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And what's funny is the only thing I remember from that movie is him jumping on that piano.
When he's at the store.
FAO Schwartz probably.
Yeah.
But
I figured the thing that you would remember would be the inadvertent child rape,
that part
if that's how you want to interpret that.
I forgot about that part too.
Yeah.
Right, because when I saw it, I was too young to latch onto that.
I
remember that our parents watched it with us. I don't even know whose idea it was to watch this movie. It had to have been one of my parents. Mm-hmm. And I guess they didn't realize that it took advantage of the fact that a PG-13 movie can drop one F-bomb.
Oh, yeah.
And it does that. Mm-hmm. And some of my siblings were relatively young at that point.
So I think, oddly enough, one of my favorite memories with my grandfather, because my grandfather's a very stoic, straight-laced guy, does what he's supposed to, always hardworking. Yeah. He took me to go see a movie, and we have a movie theater where I grew up in Weirton. It's called the Plaza. It's a one screen movie theater.
Yeah.
And Bringing Down the House was there. And I don't think my grandfather knew what movie he was getting into, because I think it was Steve Martin and Queen Latifah.
Yeah.
And I was just starting to get older. I think I was probably like somewhere between 10 and 12. And my entire family was super straight laced. And we get to the part where they have to fake something that's going on. So Queen Latifah's like, you know what? We're just gonna act like we're on a date and we're getting freaky. So throws him down on the couch. So then this person comes in, he doesn't realize what's going on. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, I got super embarrassed. I'm like 10 with my grandfather, and there's like a semi-sex scene. And I was like, I panicked, and I looked up, and my grandfather is losing it. He's laughing so hard. And I was just like, this is great. I was like, this is a phenomenal time.
Because isn't that like the perfect age where you as a kid are becoming aware of like sexuality and stuff like that, but you're not at the age to realize that your parents and grandparents are.
Yeah.
And you think that, you just came out, you were delivered by a stork and stuff like that. And so you're super embarrassed to hear about it.
Well, yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like you're not mature enough to like be an adult about it, and like they're adults about it and they laugh at it. And it was where like you get embarrassed about it, and like, I think that like to me that was like an absolutely priceless moment in my life because I was like, oh, he finds this funny. I also found that funny. Cool. Like
You wanted approval to laugh at it.
Yeah, it was great. It was fantastic.
I like how we managed to get from all the movies that the tough guys do with the kids movies the tough guys do to this.
Oh yeah.
What was the other one I was thinking of that led me down this road? It was
Is it the one with Ice Cube?
no. What did Ice Cube do?
I think it's Ice Cube. Which one's the one that did Good Day?
It was Ice Cube.
Yeah, it was Ice Cube. Yeah. So he did a family friendly one, and there was a joke. It's either you die hard or live long enough to make a family movie.
Yep.
And that's that one was good. That one got me good.
What was the most recent one? Oh, it was
Which
Dave
actor?
Bautista.
Dave Bautista.
He did the spy movie where the little girl catches him being a spy.
Oh, I don't think
I think it was called I think it was called I Spy or 'cause the problem is there was a Melissa McCarthy spy movie released right around the same time. And I can't remember which is which.
So you said you think it was called I Spy?
Something like that, yeah. Or My Spy. Something like that. And I think the Melissa McCarthy one was the one with Anne Hathaway.
I Spy. I think isn't Anne Hathaway supposed to play like Carmen Sandiego in one of these movies coming up?
Oh yeah, there is something about Carmen.
Because I was thinking that because it was like Where in the World. Yeah, it's Where in the World with Carmen Sandiego, right?
Yeah,
that's her name. Yeah, I was thinking that it was Anne Hathaway that was supposed to do that, but that might have been it. With the she may be the counter in that I Spy movie. There was
not the one with Dave Bautista. She's the friend / antagonist in the Melissa McCarthy one.
I'm look up.
Yeah, it was My Spy.
Oh, it was My Spy.
Yeah, with the little girl. But then what's the Melissa McCarthy one? Melissa McCarthy one is just called Spy.
Oh, is that supposed to be a parody?
I guess.
Oh, so she's a. Oh yeah, it's definitely a parody.
Jason Statham, Jude Law. So that's not the one with Anne Hathaway. So I gotta look all the because we're weaving this web. The Hustle is the one with Anne Hathaway.
Oh, but The Hustle?
Yeah.
Which one is that about?
I forget. It's a Melissa McCarthy movie, so I don't pay it much heed. The only one of her movies I've watched recently.
Oh, it looks like it's them going around trying to hustle people out of their money.
That's it. That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I guess Anne Hathaway's character is hustling Melissa McCarthy or something like that.
Oh, that's funny.
I know Anne Hathaway becomes an antagonist.
So it becomes a hustler's hustle?
I guess, yeah. What was the only Melissa McCarthy movie I saw was the puppet one, the Muppet one.
Oh, the Muppet,
the offensive Muppet one.
The offensive. Avenue Q.
No, I don't think.
Yeah, Avenue Q is a theatrical, like all of the Sesame Street Muppets.
Yeah.
That are like supposed to be like adults. So they have an entire song called like "The Internet is for Porn." So they every time like the internet and like there's a guy in the background that just screams it's for porn.
Oh my god, Happy Time Murders.
The Happy Time Murders.
I love the Muppets. I love watching Muppets. They're so much fun. So Ryan and I went and saw it thinking, how bad could it be? I think we forgot that it was a Melissa McCarthy movie, which kind of automatically makes it not good. Because, she could be the best person in the world, but her movies appeal to the lowest common denominator.
Oh, yeah.
Through
and
and
through. It makes
through.
it hard.
What was the one where she played... It started with a T, Tabby or something like that, or Tammy, where the whole movie, the joke was, this girl's fat.
I don't remember. Is it the Oh, I can, because it's like it's not an acronym, but it's like a newer slur that they call it. Like,
Maybe.
Oh, what's it? What is it? I can't think of it. Usually, I'm pretty good at that. I usually keep up with like the
You're
new
good
woke
at the slurs.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm good at learning what the new woke term is that is become offensive that wasn't offensive 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
So
It probably was, knowing her. Anyway, all of this to say, we know nothing about Black Adam, but it's a movie that's being made with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I was looking at the article here to see if it has a release date.
that is a good question. A lot of things have been
July
coming out
29th, 2022. And I guess this was a set photo for day one of filming. So that is a thing that has happened.
Yeah, so we got about a year until that
give or
comes out.
Do you want to know it's 2 years away? Shazam 2. Called Shazam Fury of the Gods.
Oh yeah.
What do you know? Because I know
which God's Fury?
That's a good question. Nick, maybe?
That would actually be a really funny joke if it's just like
The god is named Nicholas. Because Shazam is DC. So that'd be even funnier. It's like a jab at Marvel. So what do you know about Shazam?
I know that Shazam is a child that yells Shazam and becomes effectively discount Superman.
Yeah.
And runs around and tries to fight, but is always kind of dealing with the fact that he's a kid trying to be an adult.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a cool story. It's kind of like a Spider-Man setup, but a little different.
Yeah. That's fair.
Well, same struggles, I'll say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's dealing with school life and the movie, it's really good. I'd recommend watching it because they do it really well. They play off the, a kid in a man's body type thing, him dealing with family life. Because I believe, if I remember correctly, it's him. I think he's by himself, and then he's adopted by a foster family. And he has trouble. The movie sets up he's had trouble with foster families all his life.
Yeah.
And he's constantly trying to find his mother, who he got separated from at a carnival or something and couldn't find her. And so he'd been in and out of foster homes. And he lands at this one.
Was he old enough, or is that just the thing that
really
he thinks happened?
He was really young, so he doesn't remember anything about the carnival. But he was young enough to remember bits and pieces. And now the movie, he's 13 or 14, maybe a little younger.
Yeah.
And he's constantly been breaking out, trying to find his mother. And then he's in this home, and it's a really nice family, but he has his own issues. And this family's been this couple has been bringing in kids that have issues to try to help them all.
Yeah.
So one of them, I believe, he has crutches and has trouble walking. I don't know if they explicitly say that he has
polio.
No, close. What's the one that Walter White's son has?
MS.
Yeah, multiple
sclerosis.
Yeah,
it's hard. I always think the Family Guy bit where he's got a monkey scrotum.
You have to use crutches and have trouble walking.
Yeah,
but anyway, I don't know if they explicitly say that this kid has any of those issues. And then there's they got the what's the term? The rogue gallery.
The rogue
kids
gallery.
With all the different
the disenfranchised.
Yeah. And so the movie follows him getting these powers, and then the one kid with the crutches is the one who is kind of his buddy in this movie. The others are more side characters.
Yeah.
And it's them learning how to use this power and trying to become a superhero. And then Mark Strong is the villain, who is now possessed by demons or controls demons, something like that. And so they've got they're the 7 deadly sins. That's what it is.
Oh, okay.
All
that makes
these
sense.
Demons that represent the sins of humanity. And so they got to fight them. And so that's basically the plot. And it's a good movie. So the sequel is probably the fury of the gods that get mentioned as being the ones that bestowed these powers and these sins in the first place. If I'm remembering it all correctly.
I was going to say, is I don't know if you know or not, Brian might. Isn't Black Adam kind of like the counter to Shazam? It's kind of like
think-
I think it's like the or not antithesis. Is it antithesis? Is that the right word?
Yeah,
Am I using that right?
opposite.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like both of them have effectively the same powers. One is just used for good, and the other it's kind of like
I
Flash
think.
and Breakpoint.
Yeah, and I think they mention him. They show him as a bad guy in the first Shazam in a flashback type dream thing, saying that this guy wreaked havoc on the world centuries ago, and now Shazam protects against him or something like that. There's a throwaway stuff.
So he protect, but does he attack?
Shazam or Black Adam? They both attack. So they're making a second one because the first one was successful and was a good movie. It's going to be called Shazam: Fury of the Gods.
I was gonna say, with DC, does it really matter if it was successful or not?
Not
I
really.
was gonna say they probably would have put it out anyway.
Yeah, that's DC for you.
Well, I think they're probably gonna start trying to get some bigger, more popular names now. Like, because not that they don't have bigger, popular names, but I think.
What do you mean, actor wise or character wise?
Actor wise,
Yeah.
I don't think they're gonna. I don't think they want to run the risk of bringing in someone new into the industry into these positions because they're already having a hard time gaining ground. So I think they want to go for like the big name actors. I wouldn't doubt if they throw a crap ton of money at Terry Crews. Like, I wouldn't doubt if they tried to throw a ton of money at some of the people that did the Marvel. Now that Marvel's kind of like in a lull, I wouldn't doubt if they just like threw money at them trying to get them to come out. But I'm sure there's some kind of no compete with.
I don't know if there'd be a
between the two.
non-compete, but I think DC would be remiss to hire them because they already have the Marvel brand identity attached to them, and so DC wouldn't want to hire these people because they know that people would go into the movie comparing them to their character in Marvel.
That is true too.
And off the top of my head, I can't think of any actors who've been in both. You have some like Chris Evans, who played Johnny Storm in the first Fantastic Four movie.
Yeah.
And then was Captain America now.
Yeah, but both of those are Marvel.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that does make sense. Where they'll keep them within the the comic book universe, but not.
But even then, they've already thrown money at star power. I mean, you have Ben Affleck as Batman. You have Jeremy Irons as Alfred. You have, I don't know how big Gal Gadot was before Wonder Woman.
I didn't know who she was until Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
And then, to be honest with you, Gal's one of those actors that it feels like her opinion needs to be said all the time.
Which isn't the worst thing in the world, but
well, I mean, it's kind of par for the course for that. But it was one of those things. It was kind of the lady who does Captain Marvel.
Brie Larson.
It was kind of one of those things where like she had said something similar along the lines of like insulting the fan base because it was just one of those things where it's like I get it even if that's your opinion.
Yeah,
like you're just gonna hurt yourself and your industry.
Yeah,
like,
you got to be careful about how you phrase that. It's the pitfall of having any sort of public influence and following is you have to be sure that you're not. I don't know how to phrase it. You have to be careful what you say because a lot of people listen to you.
Oh yeah,
and no matter what you say, it's gonna be polarizing to someone.
Yeah, it's a lot of phrasing.
Yeah.
Like, and it, like
Are
it's
we still doing that? I appreciate that you.
That was awesome. It was like as soon as you said it, I was like, that's from something. What's that from? Archer. I like Archer. Like so that was everything that happened in that half a second in my brain.
I can picture the flowchart moving across too,
back and forth. Oh, that's great. Oh, yeah, but I think a lot of that is like even. No, to be honest with you, I think the biggest issue is that people use buzzwords when they're talking.
Yeah.
And that's what catches them. If they just kind of came out and said, hey, look, like, I think this is what it was, and like didn't use a buzzword but said the same exact thing, it doesn't kind of like start that war over the buzzword.
Yeah.
I think the buzzword gets people more than it does anything else.
Well, because then you get into the big battles over semantics and what was the subtext.
Yeah. And like, and was this a situation for that buzzword or wasn't it a situation for this buzzword? And it becomes a bigger argument than the actual event.
Yeah. So to go back to what we were saying about the actors, they've already been doing it with Ben Affleck, to some extent Gal Gadot, Jeremy Irons, absolutely with Joaquin Phoenix and Joker.
Yes.
I don't know how you go up from there. Like, I think it's pretty agreed upon that Joaquin Phoenix is one of the greatest actors of this generation.
Oh, he's phenomenal. If you look at all the different things that he's been in,
Oh my God.
and like it
Even the simpler roles like Signs or not quite as simple, but Gladiator.
yeah, he was great in Gladiator. He
he's
did
phenomenal.
what was the one out in the woods where they were hiding away from society? The Village.
Yeah.
He was good in The Village. He's got such a range.
Yeah.
Like, and it's one of those things where like it's hard to be able to not play the same character in every movie.
Yeah.
Because that's usually what people get hired to do. It's like, hey, you're really good at this kind of acting. It's
Yeah.
kind of like Russell Crowe.
Yeah.
He's really good at being the warrior.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like, he's really good at being the straight-laced warrior who's willing to die for his honor.
Yeah.
That's really the only
Gladiator,
role he plays.
Robin Hood. Effectively what he is Kal-El Jor-El in Superman.
Yep.
Or Man of Steel. Even Noah.
Yeah. Even though Noah was an absolutely
Les Miserables.
awful- Yeah, he plays the straight-laced cop that
Yeah.
like doesn't like there is no bending of the rules.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the kind of play
I've never
character
thought
he
of it
plays
that
well.
way. But you're absolutely right.
But that's kind of one of those things where it's like those are the actors that do well. Where it's like when someone thinks, "Man, I need a straight laced guy who would die for honor," call him, and
Yeah.
that's how you kind of get that reputation. But like Joaquin Phoenix isn't that. It's
No,
one of those
he's
things
not.
where it's like, "Hey, come in and let's see if you can do it," and
Yeah.
he does it, and it's like, great.
He's-
Like, where do I put you?
You don't go in thinking I need an actor who can be this and this. When you want to hire Joaquin Phoenix, you think I need Joaquin Phoenix to look at this and be
what it is.
this character.
Yeah,
like did
exactly.
you see Her?
I did not, but I remember the commercials for it, and
Absolutely
it looked great.
phenomenal movie. It's the brilliance of the movie. Do you know the general synopsis of it?
Yeah, where he falls in love with his AI.
Yeah, his phone essentially with a super advanced Siri type thing. And I think it's Scarlett Johansson as the voice of the phone. The movie is just brilliant. It's it's subtle with what it kind of. I mean, it's not so subtle as we're becoming increasingly dependent and in love with our technology.
Yeah.
But there's something about the movie where, you know how you can watch films and TV where you see relationships and things like that, and they don't really faze you. Maybe you think, oh, that's a cute relationship they have, or ooh, that's kind of creepy. This one was weird in Her because you almost feel like you're a peeping Tom or a voyeur looking too far into someone's life and how they communicate with their loved ones, despite the fact that his loved one is a phone.
It sounds like they actually built a believable story of a character that actually believes that he's fallen in love with this thing.
Yeah,
And like that's a hard thing to do.
it is.
And that's exactly what
I
Joaquin
got
Phoenix
as
can
they're
do.
going through the movie. You're just kind of you feel like you're seeing too much in a good way. Like it made me feel things that most movies don't.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of the thing with like on-screen romances. They're so bad because it's like it's one of those things where it's at a certain point it's because the plot demands it, and within an hour and a half you have to show we don't like each other or we're not interested in each other to getting there.
Yeah.
And like that's a hard thing to do in that short period of time.
Or even relationship struggles. Like a movie that does it really well is Incredibles, for example. Is they are in a loving marriage, but there's strain on it.
Yes.
And then there's even more strain when he starts having a secret life. And as a kid, I totally missed it. But as an adult, you watch it, you realize she thinks he's cheating on her.
Yeah, the whole time.
Yeah. And just the brilliance of the subtlety of it.
Yeah, and that's the kind of the thing is like when you do it right and you let it like lead up to it, it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
But I think what ends up happening is like, it's kind of weird, but it's honestly the worst one I've ever seen. Is there's a scene in The Last of Us 2 where like the secondary main character is she's having this fight with someone that used to be a love interest, and like something happens to where she should effectively step in and just kind of shoot the guy.
Yeah.
And it's like there's zero reason for what happened. Like they're yelling at each other. Like it gets to the point where like you think they're going to start punching each other, and then it's turns into a sex scene, and you're just like, what on earth happened? Like, it made no sense. Like, you built no tension between the two of them to make this even reasonable.
You think that people yelling at each other builds tension, but it's what they're yelling at each other about that is what builds. It's honestly a mistake that a lot of films make, is they mistake tension for stress, or emphasis, or loud noises. They think that world-ending threats are tension. They're not. They're the threat.
Yes.
Tension is, is this it's hard to describe because it's a nebulous thing. Is tension requires you to care about the characters.
Yes. And there's something to be said about, like, the characters care about each other and they're upset with each other because they're doing things that would harm themselves.
Yeah.
And when you come across that correctly, it comes across as, oh, you two care about each other and you're mad at each other because you care about each other. And then as soon as you guys realize that both of you care, that's when the fight stops and it goes somewhere else.
Yeah.
But that's always the problem, is they make it like it's like a legitimate fight about things that really, really matter. It's not a fight about things that don't matter or semi-matter.
Well, I'll give you a brilliant example. Is Captain America: Civil War. Is you have the tension is super thick in that movie because you have Tony Stark and Captain America at each other's throats, but they're friends, and this issue is tearing them apart. And on top of that, both of their arguments make sense.
Yeah, that was the best part about Civil War.
Yeah, they both have a point. There's no, Zemo's the villain in it.
Yeah,
but between the two of them, neither of them are wrong necessarily.
Yeah, it was an ideological difference. It was like, do we go for security or do we go for freedom?
Yeah.
And like, to me, that's at the very beginning of that movie. It was the best part of that movie. And like, they kind of like tapered off as it went.
Yeah.
But the beginning arguments were great. It was like, it's like, what happens if they want us to go somewhere or they don't want us to go somewhere? We don't have the freedom to make that choice.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, why do you get to make that choice? And it's like, okay, well, you've got two good arguments. You gave the best argument for both sides. And then now you're going to fight best argument versus best argument, as were a lot of movies, especially kind of like with the Captain America movie. I thought that they were going to go like, yeah, freedom is the best, and just kind of throw this like petty tyranny argument out.
Yeah.
But they actually built a good argument of like, well, who regulates? Like, why do you get to be the one to regulate? Like,
yeah,
it's it's a legitimate like moral conundrum. And like, it's like, okay, well, who does regulate? And it's like, I'm choosing that this group regulate and you're choosing that group regulate. And it's like, I think it should be other group. It's like, great. Now you're arguing the same point. You're just trying to figure out how to make it happen.
Yeah.
Instead of it being two completely different points.
Exactly. And other movies and shows might have a good complex argument like that, but they tend to fall down on like, no, this argument was the one that was right.
Yeah.
So if you felt like you were agreeing with the other one, they say, ha, idiot.
Exactly.
You agreed with the wrong person. Whereas Civil War and beyond, because the Sokovia Accords, which were the crux of the movie, for anyone who doesn't know, the quick explanation is Tony and other Avengers supported the Sokovia Accords, which basically limited the Avengers' decision-making powers and freedom to react to threats to Earth. Whereas Captain America fell on the side of not signing the Accords because he believes that the Avengers should have the freedom to react to things. And that's the whole crux of the movie. And the movie never tells you which one is right. The movie kind of veers off and goes on to the superhero battling, but it's charged by the tension from the Sokovia Accord debate. And then throughout the rest of the series, they're brought up. Sure, they take a very huge step back when Thanos kills half the universe. But even still, they are still something that looms over the head of the Avengers. So they don't back down from this plot point, really. And they don't say which one is right. Well, and they let you decide.
And what's cool is because they've built a really well-connected story throughout the whole thing in not Endgame, but in Infinity War, they show up and they're like, hey, listen, like, by the authority of the authority of the Accords, you guys can't do something. And like, everyone in the room says, okay, well, this is a moment where the regulation doesn't work.
Yeah.
And like, it's one of those things that's kind of cool where it's like, okay, like, you ended up hitting it all across. Like, up until that point, it did work. It's like, but this is an exception.
Yeah.
It's like, and it was kind of cool that you get to see a little bit of everything where it's like, we know there's exceptions to the rule, but what's the rule going to be?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the cool thing. And like, to me, because, well, our audience might not know, but I absolutely love arguments. And it's just like, I enjoy like the ideas and like what comes out of them and what makes more sense. And like, to me, that kind of thing is awesome, where it's like, okay, what should the rule be? Should it be with the individual or should it be with the organization? And obviously there's exceptions, and this is an exception.
Yeah.
So it's like, but is that the rule?
Yeah. Like, this guy is threatening to end half the universe. I feel like you shouldn't get worried about being tied down by a piece of paper.
Yeah.
Like, you know, because the Sokovia Accords were written because of the massive destruction caused by people threatening the Avengers.
Yep.
Calling them out, essentially. I think Vision straight up says it is. The number of threats to Earth has increased exponentially since Iron Man revealed himself here on Earth.
Yeah.
And more heroes and villains have appeared. And so there's a compelling argument to be made, is that the fact that the Avengers have all this power and are able to use it at their whim is inviting these threats.
Yeah, well, and I think that's kind of the cool thing. Like, Vision's argument was like a phenomenal middle ground, where he's like, I'm not going to tell you which one of you is correct, but he goes, you can't deny that there is something going on. How you solve it is debatable, but you can't deny that like you guys having power makes people want to challenge you.
Yep.
And that's true. Like, if you think about it, like with anything, like even like people in their jobs, like you want to challenge that person that has the power. You want to show that like you might not have it all together, and like it might not even be like a nefarious thing. It's just a natural thing that happens.
Well, look at you can look at professional sports. Look at anyone. You look at hockey, which is one. You have people who look at Gretzky or currently Sidney Crosby or Ovechkin, where everyone is trying to beat them because they're the best.
Yep.
And so people are competing with them. It's fun if you watch Crosby and Ovechkin, especially Crosby, they are playing a different game. They're playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers.
Oh yeah.
And everyone else is trying to compete with them, and they're just trying to play hockey. And it's the same thing in here, is the Avengers have all this power and they're inviting threats by having it. And on top of that, you've got what? 5, 6 people in the Avengers at that point who have the power to defend an entire planet. And they're the ones who are deciding what they defend against, how they do it, and essentially being culpable for the losses. Like the woman at the beginning of Civil War, who has a picture of her son.
Yeah.
And says he died in Sokovia because of what you guys were doing there.
Oh yeah. Well, and they did a really good job, especially with the way that they set it up with the second Avengers movie with Ultron, because that is Tony's fault.
Yeah.
So like it was one of those things where like throughout this, like you could tell someone sat down and said, okay, how do we put the two of these together? Because Civil War was going to be a big deal in the MCU. It's like, well, how do you do it? Well, you make Tony legitimately be a problem, even though he's the guy that goes against regulation. You have to have him have a change of heart that makes him want to be for regulation.
Yeah.
And then, her showing up saying, hey, listen, you being a jackwad and not actually like doing things right and like by the book caused his death. And like to a degree, you get like that's a reasonable response to it. It's not like there was a tragedy and someone died and you're like, well, because of you, this happened.
Yeah.
Like it is because of him, because he didn't actually do what he was supposed to. It led to the deaths. It wasn't like a direct, it was indirect, but he's still responsible. He's not at fault, if that makes sense.
His defense, he is responsible, but he had no way of knowing what would happen. But with what was it? It was linking the Mind Stone to Jarvis.
Yes.
And he had no idea that would happen. But he is still culpable for it. And I think he's projecting his guilt onto all of the Avengers.
Exactly.
Because if you're that woman, you don't care that what they did there was essential for stopping Ultron from ending the world. All you care about is that your son is dead.
Exactly.
And that the Avengers were there.
Yeah, well, and I think that's one of those things where it's interesting of like anytime there is a tragedy, you do have people that place blame in the wrong place. And like for her character, it's almost correct. And Tony's big thing has been like trying to protect people, and he's usually done it by breaking the rules. And this time he broke the rules a little too far, where it wasn't like, oh, hey, this regulation is preventing me from doing the right thing. It was, this regulation actually should have saved or it should have prevented this from happening.
Yeah.
And I didn't follow it. So like you end up building this really good argument for him to feel guilty about it reasonably. And like you said, he then projects it to say like, well, if I messed up, we could all mess up. It would be better if we didn't.
Yeah.
And like it ends up being this really interesting thing. But to what we were saying, I think the best way that
I totally forget how we got here, by the way.
yes, to be honest with you, that's the best. I like that.
Yeah.
But I think for Tony's thing, this is actually something I've been thinking about lately with with my girlfriend when we sit down and like have debates on like morals and whatnot.
No.
Tony is responsible, but he's not at fault.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things where it's like I had no clue this thing was going to happen. It was my responsibility to be safe, and I didn't realize it wasn't going to be safe. So it is my responsibility that Ultron is out in the world. But it was in no way, shape, or form my intent. Or it's like the difference between being ignorant and being negligent,
or the difference between murder and manslaughter.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And that makes the difference where it's like it's not like he intended to kill your son, but he is the reason that he's gone.
Yeah.
And that gives her the best argument to be like, hey, listen, like I'm not mad at you. I just want you to know what happened.
And
her character ends up being like a crucial point of continuing forward.
Yeah, and for her and for anyone in her position, it makes perfect sense.
Exactly.
Is that she doesn't care why Ultron did it. All she knows is that the Avengers were there and that Tony had a hand in creating Ultron.
Yep.
If that's even public knowledge. It's the difficulty of a movie like that is you as the audience know all of this stuff.
Yeah.
But
what is the rest of the world?
Yeah, exactly. Like they know about aliens from New York and this and that. But do they know that Ultron was created because Tony was doing secret experiments?
Yeah, that is a good question. And that's something that, well, I think it may not have been out. Well, no, it probably was out at that time because that would have bbeen probably the reason why Tony was like advocating for the Sokovia Accords.
Yeah.
But that also, well, and that's also one of those things that's kind of interesting is like, it is that suspension of disbelief kind of thing where it's like, okay, he wouldn't go to jail for it. But it's one of those things where you think about it, it's like, okay, well, do you arrest him for the crime of manslaughter and like leading to the events of this like attack? Or
and you know what, you bring up a really good point is beyond Iron Man 2 when they're bringing him to court to try to get the Iron Man suit off of him, other than that there's no real point where someone tries to prosecute the Avengers, which is something people would do, and they do it in Batman versus Superman. They bring up pretty heavy-handedly that the government is afraid of Superman.
Yeah,
and they want to try to find a way to control him or understand him because he is a god, and they have no clue if he's really benevolent or not.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's something that's not really explored in Avengers. They have these accords, but it's pretty darn clear that the whole world kind of looks to the Avengers, and you'd think these governments would be afraid of them and try to find some way to neutralize them.
Yeah, and it is kind of interesting. I think that like it's implied, but it's not a plot point.
Yeah,
as where I think in
and I feel like
DC,
I should clarify, by the way, by neutralize, I don't mean try and kill the Avengers. I mean wrap them up in legal proceedings and try to get them in prison or something like that.
Yeah, and that's also one of those things that's kind of interesting. Is like, how do you imprison someone like that?
Exactly.
Like it's very difficult.
That's the big debate in Batman versus Superman. Is like, how do you even get this guy under control? Or if he decides to kill us all, there's nothing we can do.
Well, and Superman's unique too because that's kind of his shtick. Is like you can't.
Yeah,
and like you're lucky he's benevolent.
Yeah,
and it's like you're lucky that he's not a tyrant. Like in the Marvel universe, it's kind of like. It's like Thor kind of has that, where he's kind of above and you couldn't stop him. But it's interesting. It's like you might have an argument with Tony where it's like if you can get him away from his tech, well then you could leave him in a cell. But it's like, but you can't do that with Cap because Cap, he is the superpower. Yeah, effectively. Same thing with Thor. Same thing with almost all the other ones.
Yeah, Bruce Banner.
Bruce Banner, yeah, like you can't lock him up.
No.
Like at all. Like it's so like it kind of I think it runs into one of those things where it's like if they ran down that line, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
But for DC, it's kind of a plot point because it's not possible. And the plot point is, well, how do we?
Yeah.
And like that's kind of the
Well, and I think I've talked about this before recently on the show, it's Marvel's view of men as gods and DC's view of gods as men, where they're almost looked at in different ways. As you have in Marvel these flawed people, but they have these extraordinary gifts, whereas in DC they're these people with these even stronger gifts, but living as normal people and being absolute good. Because that's the misstep that Zack Snyder did with Superman was he didn't make him the absolute good paragon of virtue that Superman is supposed to be.
Yeah.
Superman is supposed to be the best of us, despite all this power that would corrupt a lesser person.
Yes.
But because he is just such a good man, he is a force of good in the world.
Yeah, exactly. And this big thing with like the way I think they tried to touch on it in Man of Steel, where it's like his dad made it very, very clear, you do not use your power. He's like, you actually like have conversations and you negotiate with people and like you treat them as people, even though you could be a tyrant, even though you could use your power to get what you want. That's not the moral thing to do.
Yeah.
Which sets him up to be like, okay, I could at any point in time take anything I wanted, but that's not the right thing to do.
Exactly.
So we won't. And that's one of those really cool setups.
And then but then the movie shoots itself in the foot by having the destruction of Metropolis, where Superman could absolutely prevent this entire city from crumbling, but he doesn't because he doesn't want to kill Zod. But by doing so, he's letting thousands and tens of thousands of other people die.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, throughout all of history, I think Superman has not had an issue with killing his villains, as long as it's to protect people.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the thing. To be honest with you, I think that's one of those things that like they could have added, because I think I've said before, like I think one of my favorite movie scenes is kind of where Hollywood backs into the right answer, like when they do the scene where he's sitting in the church and the guy's like, well, sometimes faith comes first, then trust comes later. I was like, that's actually a really perfect, accurate description of religion.
Yeah,
like it's like sometimes you just have to follow the values first, and then once you start realizing that the values work, then you actually start to trust them and believe it. And like that's kind of what faith is, and that's kind of like the thing for him is like he needed somebody else in his life to say, you know, sometimes there's no good solution, and then that would have given him the okay, there's nothing I can do but kill Zod.
Yeah,
because it's Zod or the others, and Zod isn't going to stop. He's given me an absolute that I can't get around.
Yeah,
and that gives him. It's one of those things where it's like you can start to realize like, okay, he is working his way towards becoming that, like becoming above the rest of us morally. Is he still figuring it out while he's younger?
Yeah,
and then like you can get to the point where it's like, okay, well sometimes you don't have an option.
Yeah,
and the school bus could have been a good opportunity, and I think that's kind of like the school bus thing.
Yeah,
if they would have articulated it better, it would have worked out, because obviously his dad's mad at him that he used his powers, but that should have been something his dad said too. His dad should have looked at him and said, I get it, sometimes you don't have an option. Yeah, and that should have been the thing where like when he went for Zod, and then that you can just have that voice pop. That's one of the things that I'm kind of surprised they don't do more in movies.
Yeah,
where they do the thought process through like the soft articulation, where it's like, sometimes you don't have an option, and then he does it, and he knows why he did it, and he doesn't break down. And although it's hard, he knows there was no good solution.
Exactly. There's no right answer.
Yeah,
it's just whichever answer is the least wrong.
And
and that's another part where the movie kind of falls apart, is his dad's reaction to that, where he almost straight up tells him, you should have just let those kids die.
Yeah,
they should have done it a more realistic way, where his dad says, well, yeah, there wasn't a right answer there, but the more right thing to do was to save those kids.
Yeah, and I do think that's kind of the thing where it's like his dad. It's kind of like one of those things like when you do something wrong, and like, well, like when you do something that wasn't necessarily wrong, but your parents are mad that you do it. Usually they're like, well, why didn't you do this? And you're like, well, I couldn't because of this. And it's like, well, why didn't you do that? Like it could have been a scene like that where he was like, why didn't you just help them get out? It's like, well, we couldn't. The doors were busted.
Yeah,
it's like I couldn't not use my powers. There was nothing I could have done.
There was 30 kids in there. I couldn't carry them all out without somebody. The last couple drowning.
Yeah, and that's one of those things where like they could have looked at it, and then his dad could have just looked at him and said, I get it. As he goes, okay, I get it. You didn't have any other option.
Yeah.
He goes, but and then he should have said, but don't like it's like, but don't take this as an opportunity to do what you want. Like, it still have that warning of like, still don't do anything you want now, even though these people might know. Don't let it on. But it does give him that moral principle of do what you have to do.
Yeah.
And I do think that's kind of what DC has been going on, because
and again, it's like how you're saying it makes it sound like a much better movie than it actually is. Because not 15, 20 minutes after that talk with his dad, he impales a semi truck with a bunch of logs.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's so
he gets
uncharacteristic. Like, because the guy is he's hitting on a girl there and she doesn't want it. And he's a dick for doing it when she says not to stop. But then Clark tells him to stop. And as he's walking away, the guy throws a drink at his head. And Superman's response is to impale his truck with a bunch of logs in a way that there's no way to explain that either. It's not like a freak windstorm came through or something. This truck is mangled.
So there's one thing that I think I'm good at, and that's finding better ways to do scenes. I couldn't make a movie to save my life, but like I think the best thing that they could have done with that is
then you'd be a good editor then.
Well, when he goes back to his car afterwards, he should like try to open it, but the door's bent. Like it's bent just enough so he can't get in, and like he's screwed. Or it's one of those things where he goes to look at his engine and now his engine's gone. It's like whoa, like did someone just come take my engine? It's more subtle than exactly like you said. It's like you can't get away from that.
Yeah,
it's like how on earth
you know
did
exactly
this
why they did it, right?
Yeah, to show
it was the spectacle of it. And that's the issue with that whole movie is it wants the spectacle.
Well, and to be honest with you, I think that's kind of why like part of it was I'm amazed that they refrained from it so much, but it was those moments where you could tell that they wanted this big moment. And like that's a big thing that like Hollywood and even like theatrical like current more modern theatrical plays have gotten themselves in trouble. Instead of having a movie that is good, that has spectacle moments, they have a movie built around the climax of a spectacle. And
the whole rest of the movie is literally just there
to build it,
to hold up that climax they want.
Yeah, and there's a I don't know if I've said it before or not. I know my girlfriend is going to listen to this and she's going to go, I can't believe you're still on this. There's a theatrical play called Spring Awakenings.
Okay.
And the entire show is garbage. Like it really is. It's hot garbage. And it's supposed to be all these teenagers that like their parents don't understand them and all their parents are the same. And like, and there were some really cool like theatrical things that they did. Like all of the parents are played by the same two people. So it's to show like, and that's one of those things where I was like, wow, that's actually really smart. I really enjoyed that part of it. But the problem is like none of them were smart. None of them were benevolent. They didn't have a second set of parents that were supposed to show the contrast of like were individuals. It was supposed to be all of them were the same. And the show that I watched, it leads to this big spectacle of a rape scene that's actually shown on stage.
Oh, yikes.
And like, it's one of those things where like, it's like you literally, you could have done so much better by having a scream or something and going black and letting my mind run.
Yeah.
Than showing it. But the rest of the movie is garbage. Like the second half is or the second act is super short. And it's like, well, her mom didn't like that and tried to make her get an abortion. And she's dead. It's like, and you're supposed to feel bad for her. And it's like, I don't understand like what just happened. Like it's like you wanted to have this scene, and that scene is what held up your play, and that's the only reason why your play is getting played right now is because you did something like taboo in spectacle, but the rest of the play is horrible. Now that being said, there is one character that's great. It's this girl that has a song about how her dad's abusing her, and like I love that character.
Yeah.
That character was a really, really well-built character. They had one really well-built character in the whole play. But the rest of it is garbage.
And is she not the one that's raped?
No, she's not the one that's raped.
So that's the thing.
It's a side character like, that's better.
You watch this show and you're like, there's a rape on there and you're like, oh my God, that's horrible. But there's nothing more than that because you don't care about the characters.
No.
There's no, there's nothing they set up for that character that makes you care about why this is happening and what happens after it. They just wanted to have that scene in a play.
Well, yeah, and it's one of those things where like the entire show is like it's like teenage angst to like the extreme. Because it's like, you know, when you're teenagers, you don't think your parents care. You don't think your parents get it. But it was like, it's that to all of the worst possible options a teenager could take in that moment.
And then
it's like
confirming that they're right about it, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's so weird. Like, it's just like, what on earth are you doing? Like, it, and that's kind of the thing with like these theatrical things. They've kind of taken things in the wrong, they've taken things, they've taken like breaking expectations to just wrong.
Yeah. And everyone thinking they need to have a twist in their movie too.
Oh, yeah.
No, and all of what you're saying about your issues, like, and I agree with the spectacle of it. I hope that Joker taught them a lesson. Is that it doesn't have to be a big, huge spectacle. The big set pieces of that movie, the biggest set piece of that movie is what? The chase through New York, right? And that one's not that big of a set piece. And the big, huge beats of the story take place in, the biggest beat takes place in a recording studio.
Yeah. It's all small
three
rooms.
characters.
You meet people. Maybe you're outside at a bus stop. Like,
and to be fair to them, you do need an actor like Joaquin Phoenix to carry those kind of scenes. Because who was it across from him? It was wasn't Robert De Niro, was it?
Yeah, I think it was Robert De Niro.
You need two incredible actors like that completely carried that scene. You have the audience reacting, but they're nobodies. I think there was another guest who was also a nobody. But then you have these two guys who just know how to do this. And they do their characters. Well, and it's so good. And it is so much more satisfying than a beat 'em up, the half-hour-long beat 'em up.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think a big portion of that is like, that was really focused on the acting and the art of it. Like, you're focused on the story. You're not focused on the spectacle. And there's a spectacle moment where he shoots the guy in front of everybody.
Spoiler alert.
And oh yeah, well, if you haven't seen it now, that's a while. But like, there's a spectacle moment, but the rest of the story was built, and then that was the event. Like, you could have had any other moment. You could have had him fake shoot him. Like, it could have been that tension of like he's actually going to do this, and then he doesn't. Like, you could have anything happen there, and the movie is just as good.
Yeah. Doesn't the movie almost try to play it like they're just kidding? He didn't actually do it.
Yeah.
And then it commits to it. Wasn't there something like that with it?
Well, yeah, I think it was. They built up this idea that he was going to do like a murder suicide.
Yeah.
Really well. But it was always one of those things where like, it could have went a whole host of different ways. Like, and that was one of those things where like, and like, there's like little details in the movie that like I thought were weird, but like, but overall it was about the story. It was about his like descent into madness. And like, there's only a handful of times, I think it's during his speech, where he's like, we live in a society that like abandons you in the whole 9 yards. It's like, okay, well, that was kind of on the nose.
Yeah.
But other than that, everything else was implied. Everything else was, and like, there's some little tiny things that I think I would change to make it a little better. But it was definitely, you're watching this guy do things reasonably within the world for what he thinks is going on.
Yeah.
And it's like, the entire movie is reasonable. And I think that's why the Mandalorian did so well, is like, it's not huge and big in this big event every time. I want a story that's more my sized. I don't want a story that's planet sized, because I can't do anything about that.
Or galaxy size. It's the issue I've talked about with Star Trek. Is that every new Star Trek show is this universe-ending catastrophe waiting to happen.
Yes.
That this one ship has to stop. It's like, I miss the old Star Trek where it was, this week it's an issue that threatens this ship.
Yep.
And we'll die, but there's no greater threat to the Federation or anything like that.
Yeah.
And we've just got to solve this issue that pertains to us right now. And it's what Joker does. Is the movie's not about some big threat to Gotham or to the world. The whole movie's about him and his demons. Same thing with Logan. Did you see it?
I saw parts of it, but I never actually got to see it like from start to finish.
Yeah, it's an incredible movie, and it's so good because if the bad guy wins, it sucks for Logan and one or two other people. But the stakes are to him.
Yep.
And so because you care about the character, you care about the stakes that he faces.
Yes.
Whereas you've got, I'm trying to think of a good, but I mean, the DC movies is you've got Superman. The threat he faces is these Kryptonians that are going to terraform Earth. It's like, all right, well, you didn't give me enough stuff to care about your characters, so I don't care about the stakes. And therefore there's no tension.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure, it's cool to look at, but I don't care.
Well, and I think that's kind of one of the things that's lacking right now just in our culture is a lack of reasonable things, of people saying like what matters is the small things. And like almost all these movies is what matters are the big things. And it's like, well, no, what matters are the small things. I think there's a guy that I listened to that made a point that said like, he's like, often what people tend to do is they look at their daily routine and say, well, those are the things I do every day. It's not that big a deal. It's like, but that's actually the opposite. Like the things you do every day are the most important because you're doing them every day.
Yeah.
And it sounds so obvious when you say it, but like when you think about it, it's like people don't like, I have a really hard time with routines. So like, but that's something I've been trying to fix because like, if I got my routine on track, I would be so much more productive than I already am. It would be insane. I probably waste 3-4 hours a day just because I don't have a good routine.
Yeah.
And like, that's one of those things where like, that's a small thing that I could handle that could improve my life and by extension, improve somebody else's.
Yeah.
And like our movies don't show that anymore.
Yeah.
They don't show that like, here's something you can obtain and here's an ideal that you could strive for.
Yeah.
And like, it's kind of become this like, go out there and fix this huge system that's so complex that you don't even know what to do about. And like, no wonder nobody knows what to do.
But I do agree with the argument that you do need movies that are these big, huge spectacles because on some level, there's some days I just don't want to watch a movie that is showing the struggles I go through and showing someone else going through them. Sometimes I want to see a movie that lets me escape that.
Yes.
But other times I want it, but those movies are not emotionally fulfilling.
Yes.
They fulfill my desire to experience a spectacle.
Yes.
But when it comes to a movie that is emotionally fulfilling, I'm going to watch a movie like Her or Joker or any list of others. I just watched The King's Speech this week.
Yeah,
Absolutely incredible movie. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, it was so good. But there's no action. Nobody punches anybody.
Yeah.
All the tension is in what's being said, the dialogue, and how the scenes are shot. And there's a brilliant shot toward the end as he's going to deliver his speech to say that we're entering the war. Mm-hmm. And it is just this really long shot of him walking past all of these people. Yeah. And him you can see him preparing for this speech. Because I don't know if you know the general synopsis.
It's Churchill, right?
No, King George. Who
Oh, maybe I got the wrong one.
Who was a stutterer all of his life. I didn't do that on purpose, by the way. I literally was just trying to find the right word to say. He has a stutter, and so he has a lot of difficulty speaking in public and just in general to people. And it's about this guy who's trying to help him work through it because he is set up to be the king. And eventually he has to speak. And then him giving the speech is just such a good payoff of the movie because I expected them to go in there to him to start giving the speech and then maybe do a cutaway to old footage from that period. Yeah. Or even to cut away from the speech and go to the end of the movie of them congratulating him. Yeah. They do the whole speech and him giving it and him struggling with the words he wants to say and him in the recording booth with his mentor and the guy who's helping him with the words, mouthing along, helping him do pauses instead of stuttering. Pause.
To pause.
Breathe. Mm-hmm. Say curse words in your head, something to break it up, and then keep going. Mm-hmm. And it's just such a brilliant scene. And then you get the payoff. He gets through the speech, leaves the room, and people are congratulating him. You can see on his face how proud he is of himself for pulling it off.
Yeah.
Such a good movie. And the stakes are the king doesn't speak well, and he wants to inspire his people.
Yeah.
That's it. And it works so much better.
And I think that's kind of the thing is like, the older I get, I look for more meaningful movies. But I definitely, there are still days where like, I mention this to my girlfriend every once in a while. There's days where like I play video games that are mostly storyline based, but every once in a while I'll be like, I just want to sit down and shoot Call of Duty. Like I just want to shoot things. And I think the problem kind of like to what you're saying is like, there's these really, really great movies, but almost all of the content now is like the Call of Duty shoot 'em ups.
Yep.
And it's like, well, I still want something else too. But the things that they're coming out with that are supposed to be like the King's Speech, like they're only coming out with a handful of nuggets like that because all the other ones are like they think they're relatable, but they're not.
Yeah.
And that's what's super frustrating. It's kind of like if you look at what is it? Is it the Oscars or the Emmys, whichever one it is?
Oscars.
It's like You can
Emmys
tell
are
which
TV.
one's going to win if they hit certain check boxes,
Yeah.
but not if they did well. But oddly enough, things that do really, really well, like The King's Speech, because I know that one would like broke records.
did it win Best Picture? I'm gonna look that up.
But I know that like ones like that, it's like they're not going to give it to those because they don't think those are actually relatable, even though those are the ones that are getting put out.
Yeah.
And like those are the ones that are like people are going to and being
Yeah,
like,
it
there's
won Best
something
Picture,
there that I want to see.
2011, it won Best Picture.
Oh.
It won 4 awards and had 12 nominations in 2011.
That's amazing.
Totally deserved them.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. And it's one of those things where you get people on either end. The people who only watch art house films and say, oh, those beat 'em up movies are just all spectacle and they're not worth watching. Or you get the people that are like, why do you watch all these movies that make you think and feel bad?
Yeah,
Like,
you kinda
what's
get
the point?
polars.
Don't you want to watch movies to escape all the time? It's like, you're both wrong. There's a mix. It
Yep.
depends on the day.
Yeah, exactly.
Some days I want to feel when I'm watching a movie. I want to connect with characters. Other days I just want to watch a giant monkey punch a giant lizard.
Yeah, exactly.
Moderation is key. Somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what's interesting is that like, and I want to be careful how I say that because I don't want it to be one of those implying the opposites. I think Hollywood thinks that putting the exception out there as those like emotional connecting movies is supposed to appeal to the masses, and it doesn't because it's the exception. It's not to say that that shouldn't be made. It's not to say that the exception doesn't matter, but they do focus on the exception to the point of just it's throwing out the rule despite. Well, how did I used to say that? I forget how I used to say it, but you're throwing out the rule because there's an exception.
Yeah.
And that's the problem is they've kind of gotten away from the rule and they're like, well, because there's an exception, I'm going to tell the exception story. It's like, okay, well, exception stories are cool because you still want to see people that are exceptions.
Yeah.
But not every story has to be about the exception. Sometimes it's about, what is it? It's like Jocko Williams where he's like, discipline is your best friend. Because even though you don't like the idea of following a schedule and following the standard is what works.
Yep.
And the standard is the standard because there is a rule. And you might be the exception, and you got to find that out. But try the standard first and see if it works.
A great example, The Hero's Journey. It has been a classic for millennia.
Yes.
And it works because it is just it's a classic. It's such an easy story to latch onto. The story of Luke Skywalker realizing that he has greater powers than he could have ever imagined and then losing his life. Not his life, but losing all of the people around him.
Yep.
And having to claw his way back out of there and achieve victory.
Yes.
It's such a relatable story because even though they're doing these grandiose, he's blowing up a moon-sized space station with magical powers, you still relate to it on some level because, you know, your issues aren't that huge and galaxy defining, but you still have to go through struggles like that.
Yeah. I've been kicked down too, not on a planetary level, but I've been kicked down too. Like,
Exactly. And it's been like that story has worked for centuries. And so you might get these people that think they're too good for a classic storyline like that. But sometimes you can step back in that and that's fine.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think that's one of those things that's really interesting. It's kind of like when, it's like there's a reason why we do what we do, and if you don't know why you do it, and you just kind of throw it out, like that's a problem. If you know why you did it and you decide to go a different way, you tend to be better off than if you don't understand it and you just kind of throw it.
Yeah.
It's like there's a reason why you follow that storyline. I think it was really entertaining. The worst Rick and Morty episode. As soon as I watched it, I was like, that is the worst Rick and Morty episode I've ever seen. And my buddy bought the director's cuts. And in the director's cuts, he goes, I hated this episode. He goes, we didn't follow the hero's journey. And it was I was like, and I recognized it immediately when I watched it. I was like, there was no point to this episode.
Yeah.
And that's where they were like, yeah, there was no point to this episode because we didn't follow the standard. It's like, I couldn't effectively tell my story because I didn't follow the standard.
Yeah.
But there are some movies, I can't think of them like off the top of my head.
Well,
but there's some that can kind of break that mold.
As soon as you said it, I thought of Seinfeld.
Yeah.
It's a show about nothing.
Yep.
But because that's the point, it works.
Yes.
And you have
break that.
You have these incredibly charismatic characters, but they're charismatic in a way that they're not charismatic, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it works but those things are 1 in a billion.
Yeah, they're rare. They're
Another
the
movie
exception.
that came to mind was Memento. It totally
Yes.
shatters the rules of how to make a story, but it works.
Yeah.
But all of this to say, you're familiar with Picasso, right? The artist.
Yeah, we actually have a really funny joke at our fly fishing camp,
What is
but
it?
I'll leave that alone.
Okay. Everyone, when you think of Picasso, you think of his abstract art, where it's vaguely human shaped, but it's a bunch of shapes more than anything else. And people think, oh, that's art? Like, I could do that. It's like, he's breaking the rules of art. He's not doing traditional compositions. Oh, you can just paint whatever and it'll be popular? Maybe. But look back. I don't know if have you ever looked at Picasso's old work, especially when he was an old late teenager in his 20s and
Not
so on?
off the top of my head, I may have seen some of them, but I don't identify art with individuals.
Some of his earliest works, I believe one of them is from when he was 18, is a self-portrait in pencil. Staggeringly accurate, almost photorealistic.
That's awesome.
And as he gets older, you can see his art changing into this
Over
abstract format. And it goes to show that when people break the rules and make films or art or songs that break the mold but are still successful, every single one of them already mastered the correct methods.
Yes.
Because you have to know the rules inside and out before you can start bending and breaking them.
I think
Because you need to know where to bend them, how to break them in a way that it works.
To be honest with you, I think that is exactly correct, and that's something honestly I've been trying to like think of lately, and like that is exactly correct. If you don't understand how it works inside and out, with the rule, then you don't know what you're going to break when you change something, and that is such an important thing. Is like, I know I'm going to break this, but if I break this, I can do this to replace it.
Exactly.
And it's like, but if I didn't understand how it worked to begin with, and I just throw it out, it's so difficult. And things are a lot more complicated than people think.
Yeah, they are.
And
there's rules for everything.
Oh,
But
yeah.
art especially. Everyone thinks it's subjective, and there are no rules, but there are. You know, in filmmaking, you have the easy ones. You have the thirds.
Yeah.
You know, you have your faces go in the middle third or whatever. But then King's Speech did it. For a lot of the movie, people were in one of the left or right third with 2/3 of the screen being empty space.
Yeah.
And those shots mean something. I love the quote. I've been using it a lot lately. Have you ever watched any of Plinkett's reviews on YouTube?
No.
It's a Red Letter Media bit they do where he plays the very stereotypical nerdy fat guy reviewing movies in not necessarily bad faith, but he's reviewing them in a silly way.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of doing a little bit
playing
of
a
satire.
character. And what he says it a lot, that you didn't notice it, but your brain did.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And
I do that a lot.
Where, you know, you're watching this movie. Those shots, they don't mean anything to you. Like, you can't look at that and say, "Oh, the director's trying to say this," but your brain's noticing something.
Dude, there's something that is so cool about that. When I go to church and I listen to a sermon, I'll get in the car after the sermon and look at my girlfriend and say, I'll either say there's something about that or there's something off about that, and I don't know what it is yet.
Yeah.
And like, I'll come back to her like 2 or 3 weeks later and be like, I think I figured it out. Because like my brain noticed something that like I couldn't articulate immediately. And it's one of those things, like the more I looked into it and the more I dug into it, I was like, oh, wait. I think that's what I saw. And like, and maybe I need to like look at it a little different. And like, maybe I need to focus in on this thing that I saw that was weird. And like, it's not necessarily a good or a bad thing, but it does it with both. And that's such a great thing, is like, it's like your brain picks up on things and like, but you don't understand it, but you know that there's something there. It's such a weird thing.
Music's the same way. You notice themes and stuff that are there. You don't notice it, but if you're familiar, like Star Wars, it's one reason. We're back to the sequels again. One reason they are harder to watch and they aren't as good is because the music doesn't follow the same motifs. You know, in the original trilogy, you had the Force theme, which was also Binary Star or Binary Suns, which was Luke's theme, and it kind of played into the Force theme. Those would play when he used the Force. The movie was telling you with the music what was happening.
Yeah,
but then
it associated music to action.
Yeah, and you have leitmotifs. You have which are the motif that plays when a character's on screen. So you'll have mixtures. Like if there's two characters competing, you might have both their leitmotifs fighting in the soundtrack. But then the the sequel trilogy just threw in whatever music was cool, and so it falls apart. They use the binary sunset. I forget what it is. They use that when there's a sad moment. I think it's when Rey is laying there dying. They play the Force theme or the binary stars theme, and it's like that's not her piece though. She has her own theme from Force Awakens. Why aren't they playing that along with the Force theme?
Yeah, now it's disassociated.
Exactly.
It's like, why am I hearing this now?
Yeah.
And like, yeah, you pick up on that stuff.
You don't notice it, but your brain does.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's like so interesting is like you'll start to associate things together, and like when you throw that off, and like it's so weird because it's not. This kind of gets to be more existential, but it's not you that recognizes it. It's something in you that recognizes it. It's like, what is
one of
that
the
that
best
you're picking
things?
up on?
Humans are so good at recognizing patterns. You see it in like cars. You see the headlights. The headlights are eyes, and the grill is the mouth. And car manufacturers realize it. They make the eyes more aggressive on Mustangs, and the grill so it looks like an angry face. And that might not be the best example, but you see patterns in things.
Pattern design.
And it's why Chinese, the Chinese water torture thing works. Is these drops that don't have a pattern drive you crazy because even if you're not consciously doing it, your brain is trying to establish a pattern.
Yeah.
And you don't notice it most of the time. But when there's something that doesn't fall into the pattern, it causes issues with you. You notice it suddenly. Like you might not notice something as long as it stays a pattern, but then when it's suddenly not, you notice that.
We like symmetrical things.
We do.
Well, which is really interesting.
I'm not sure where I was going with that really. But.
I think you'll enjoy the story. They did a study, and they took people and ranked.
And I do realize we are getting high on time here, so we will have to wrap it up soon. But this is a great discussion, so keep going.
So there's this really interesting story. There's a study that they did with symmetrical and asymmetrical people.
Okay.
And they had them all shower using the same soap and the whole 9 yards, and then they gave them a shirt to wear for 24 hours. And they wore that shirt for 24 hours, and then they took their shirts in, put them in a random order, and had I think it was women specifically come in and smell the shirts.
Yeah.
It based on their rankings, because they took a bunch of measurements, and they were like from least symmetrical to most symmetrical. It was almost on point based on the smell of people being symmetrical versus not.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's like we associate a ton of different things with patterns.
Yeah.
And patterns are so important. And it's really important that we not throw out the patterns before we understand why the patterns exist.
Yeah, the pattern you can apply those, like movies have the pattern. There are, I believe, I forget what they are. There's 7 main storylines that are in almost every movie, story, book, anything. You've got the hero's journey is the obvious one. You have the man outside of society, the Tarzan or Jungle Book story.
Yeah.
You have
Brendan Fraser.
I'm trying to think of others. George of the Jungle.
He's great.
Love that movie. And there's 5 more of them. I forget what they are. And there's been obviously people critiquing it saying, no, there's more different stories than that. But when you break a story down to its base elements, there's only a handful.
Yeah.
And if you stick to one of those, your story might not be good because your characters might not be good, but you've got the makings of a story there.
Yes.
And there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is what some people decry. They'll say, oh, your movie's not clever. You don't have a Shyamalan twist at the end. Do you need one? It's in music. They've pop songs. They have done research on this. Your brain likes it when it can guess what the next thing in the pattern is going to be.
Yep.
Which is why these pop songs are repetitive and have predictable lyrics. Same thing with movies. Your brain likes when it can figure out what's going to happen.
Have I ever told you the biggest fight my girlfriend and I ever had?
No.
About a song?
Are you going to put this on the show?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
She loves it. It's become a joke between us. So, have you ever heard, I think it's the Haley Steinfeld song, Most Girls?
No.
Okay, so
maybe.
So
I don't know.
we were driving to DC, and it was 4 hours, right? So we argued about Beauty and the Beast and this song. So this song came on, and my girlfriend was like, "Oh, I really like this song. I want to listen to it." Get about halfway through, and the song's saying, I want to be like most girls. And like she keeps saying it over and over and over again. And the way that my brain works, I looked at her, I said, "Why would you want to be average? Because if you want to be like most other people, then that's average." And my girlfriend looks at me without hesitating and goes, "Well, average doesn't mean average." And I'm in debate mode. And you've met me in debate mode. Everything is literal. And like interpreting, what she meant was where you think the average point is, it's higher.
Yeah.
In my brain, she just said 1 doesn't equal 1. And I looked at her while driving and went, "That is stupid."
Very compelling argument.
And she paused.
I see your point.
She paused for a second. I realized what I said, and I must have made a face because she busted out laughing. And I was like, "How do I redeem this?" And I was like, I've screwed myself. I knew that she didn't mean the words that she said. I knew what she meant, and I just totally went over my head.
I could just picture you there, alarm bells going off, damage control mode engaged, and debate mode deactivated.
And my girlfriend is wonderful. She's like, "Okay, what I meant was," and I was like, "Oh, it was like you could just." I felt my stomach drop of like, "Oh no, what have I done?" But that was.
Oh man.
But yeah, that's. I'll be honest with you, I forget what triggered that story. I know it made sense getting into it.
We kind of rambled through here. I really liked the discussion we had. I wish there was an end point that we could just be like, suffice to say, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, suffice it to say, don't tell your girlfriend she's stupid when she tells you average is average.
Yep. And then we hit all of this with but I digress. Remember to spay and neuter your pets. The Bob Barker, right?
Bob Barker.
Yep.
The price is wrong.
All of that being said, do you like that? I sufficed it all 3 times. Thank you all for listening. This was a really fun episode. I do really enjoy getting into these deeper discussions. Mm-hmm. It's almost like it's harder to do with 3 people, just because there's so many viewpoints that you can't keep it succinct.
Yeah, it's hard.
With 2 of us, it makes it a lot easier. I feel like it happens a lot when there's just 2 of us.
I also have a real hard time interrupting.
I know you do.
It'll be like one of those things, like if you go back and listen to our previous recordings, for you new people, you should do that.
Yes.
You'll notice I'll start to like say a thought, and then like I'll realize that both of you guys have something to say, and I'll be like, "Oh wait, I'll wait." I get excited listening to the opinions, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, we're trying to work you out of that.
It'll be okay. Eventually, one day, you guys will be like, "Why won't he shut up?"
That's our goal.
That's the goal.
I challenge you. Thank you all for listening. If you want to hear more from us, go to popcultureunboxing.com or wherever podcasts are sold. We have all 73 other episodes available on everywhere. You can also follow us, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at popcultureunbox. If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at MattRossVO or on Twitch at Jan Jinkle. I am trying to stream more often. Finally accepted affiliate, so you can subscribe if you want. Woo-hoo. Free Twitch Prime subscribe. Subscription.
I feel like that's more accurate based on the fan base.
True. You scrubs. You scrubs. Zach, where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter at Little Leaf, at little_leaf. That underscore is very important. I am not a middle-aged Brazilian woman.
Not yet.
Not yet.
And if you want to find Ryan, I believe he is Riki Tiki 252 everywhere. He changed it, and I can't remember the numbers. I know it's Riki Tiki, RIKITI.
I totally thought you were going off on
and then there might be another TI there. I need to look this up because he's going to get mad at me for not knowing this off the top of my head.
You can also find him.
I did get the numbers right. RIKITIKI 252 on Twitter and Twitch. He streams too.
Yeah, I was going to say, you can also find him at Red Steak Ryan everywhere. Not anymore?
No, he changed it all. It's Riki Tiki 252 now.
Oh, yeah, I'll be honest with you. I thought that was a bit you were going off of.
No.
And I totally threw me off.
Everywhere.
Oh, wow.
I disagree. I liked Red Steak Ryan.
Yeah, ignore me. I know nothing.
red steak sauce is long dead at this point. So
Oh,
anyway, thank you all for listening. I love you.
have fun.